guys, welcome back to the channel. This is the 6th episode for our Zoom automation application series, and in this what we're going to be doing is some error handling and also adding some final touches or small functions to our code and the UI. And let's begin with the error handling process. Now, error handling is a method in which we reprogram the code in such a way so that if any kind of errors come towards the program, we can handle it and make sure that the application runs smoothly and does not crash midway. And for this, first we have to scope our code or our program and see where there are chances for an error to occur. And one of those chances is in the table of the UI, which is right here. And in this, the problems are the ID box and the datetime column. Now to explain this, I'll hit add new meeting, and now here you can give your ID. Now in Zoom, a meeting ID has a certain requirement. It should be between 9 digits and 11 digits. To show this, let's open Zoom and hit join. Now if I try to type in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, you can still see that the join button has not turned blue. That means you cannot hit the join button. So 6, 7, 8, and when I reach 9, you can see that the join button turns blue. That means the ID whose digits are above 9 and between 11 are valid. Now if I type in more digits, now there are 11 digits in this ID and it's still acceptable. But if I try to type in more after 1, suppose I try to type 2 or 3 or 4, it does not allow me to. It stays at that certain number. So the valid amount of digits for a Zoom meeting ID is from 9 to 11. So we have to make sure that the ID given in the ID box right here is a digit between 9 and 11. And the next cause for errors will be the date time column. Now we have to make sure that the date and time given by the user has not been over or it is valid. That means now the current date is 27 June. So suppose accidentally I gave 26 June, then that the date time is no longer valid because it's over. So every time we hit the save button, we have to make sure to check whether the given date and time is over or is it still valid. That's error number 2. So first we'll fix these and then we'll go into the next error segment. And now let's get on with our first time lapse. Well, that ends our time lapse, and let's get into the explanation part. So first here we create the function, and after that we have a variable checked equals true. We'll get to that in the end. Now then we have a for loop which is for x in range length of self.meeting data. Now self.meeting data was the list which contained all the data of the table in the UI in a list format, and length of self.meeting data will get you the number of rows inside the table's UI. Now the for loop will run according to the number of rows in the UI. Then we have two different segments of code. This is segment number 1, which handles the errors caused by the ID column of the UI's table. And this is segment number 2, which handles the errors caused by the the date time column of the UI's table. So let's begin with the ID column. Now how we fix the errors caused by the ID column is this. Suppose we have an ID here 123 space 123 space 123. Now we have to get the exact length of these digits. For this we have to first remove the spaces in between these IDs and then take the length. So for this we create a variable length here, and length equals this self.meeting data bracket x bracket 1 dot text will get the ID or the text in the ID box. Now the reason we've given bracket x and bracket 1 is because bracket x is the row ID. Now the row ID will keep on changing according to the for loop. So suppose we have 3 rows in here, the row ID will keep on changing from 1 to 2 to 3, but the ID column will be fixed because we only need the ID, we don't need anything else. Because of that, we give the row ID as a variable and the column ID as a fixed number 1, because the column IDs, the column ID for the ID column is 1. This is 0, this is 1, this is 2, this is 3, and so on it will go. So in this single code here, we'll get you the text inside that ID box, and then we replace the spaces using the replace function. This is the thing that we need to replace with nothing. This is nothing. And after that, we use an if statement. So if the length of the ID is lesser than 9, or it is greater than 11, then you have to change the color of that ID to red. That means here, this is the ID box, and then we set the style sheet to the color red. So that text will be now in red in color, which will indicate the error. And after that, we do a checked equals false. Again, I'll get to that in the end. Then otherwise, now suppose the length of the ID is perfect, the length of the ID is in perfect color, then we change the ID's color back to black. So suppose if it was already red before and then you fixed it, now then when you hit save, you have to change it back to black so that the person knows that the error has been fixed. So that's what we do over here. And then in the next segment, we handle the date time errors. Now how this works is that first we get the current date and time, and then we get the meeting date and time over here. But now the meeting date and time that you get from the table will be in text format. So you have to convert this from text format back into date time format so that you can compare them both and check whether the current date and time is valid or not. So to do this, first you have to get the current date and time in datetime format using the datetime.now function. And after that comes these two lines. Now this is a bit complex. I'll try to explain. So this is what happens between them. Now this, the first one which you see current time, this over here is what you will get if you print datetime.now. This is the format of the this is the format of the current date and time which you get from this function. Now we need to make our date and time somewhat exactly like this so that we can compare them both. For this, first what we're going to get is, we'll just remove these both. Now if we do a self.meeting data bracket x bracket 3, now bracket x is a variable because it's a row ID, and bracket 3 is fixed because it is the column number for the datetime column. So if you check again, this is 0, this is 1, this is 2, and this is 3. So that's that. So this is what happens if you do print this part, you will get the current, the date and time of the meeting. So this is suppose the date and time that you need. Now this date and time is what you'll get when you print the self.meeting data bracket text bracket 3 dot text. But now this is in text format, and this one does not have seconds because it is just minutes, hours, and the current month and the date. This does not have a year or seconds, but here we have in the current date and time, we have the year, we have seconds, and also milliseconds. Now milliseconds is not that necessary. We only need seconds and the year. So for this, we do a string current time dot year, which will change the year that we need to the current year. And then we add a hyphen in between them because there's a hyphen here. So we put, this is the year and there's a hyphen. So you'll get a, let's say 2021 hyphen 20 and hyphen Jan. So it's almost like this one. And then we need to add seconds. So for this, we add a column 0, 0. So if we add a column 0, 0 here, you can see that it is almost like the same as this over here. So we have years, you have months, you have the date, you have the hours, you have the minutes, and you have the seconds. Now milliseconds is not that necessary. So that is how you get the meeting time. Now this still in this line is in string format. So that's why in the next line we will be converting it into datetime format. So meeting time equals datetime.strp time. Now this is the function that we use to convert string into datetime. So here in the first parameter we'll give the date and time in string format, and this is the format of that string that we gave. So first we have the year, which is right here. Then we have a hyphen, and then we have the date, which is over here, and then we have the month in text format right here. With that we also have hours, minutes, and seconds over here with a comma in between. Now this format is extremely crucial. It should be exactly like the string that you give in. So now if you print meeting time, you will get a datetime format just like the current date and time. Now after all this, then we go back to the if statement. So here we do a if meeting time is less than current time, then that means that meeting time is invalid. So if it's invalid, we change its color to red and we set checked to false. Now if it is valid, then we change the color back to black. So that's how the check data function works. And now we go to the checked variable. So to do this, what you have to do is go to save table and type in a if self dot check data, bracket open, bracket close, and column, and then you move all this from here to here inside this if statement, and then you do else return, just in case. Now the reason we're doing this is, so first we'll get to the checked variable. So first checked variable will be true. So this in case if there's no kind of errors, that means if the length is correct and the datetime is valid, then the checked variable will not be changed to false. It will still stay true, and the function will return the checked variable, which will be true. The value will be true. Now suppose I open another console here. Let's take a new console and let's type in if true print 0, and I hit enter. So you can see that 0 is printed. Now if I do the same with false, if false print 0, you can see that 0 is not printed. This is because in case if you have an error in your code, so that when you hit save table, it prevents the saving function in occurring, so that the table which has an error does not get saved. So if there are no errors and it's fully functional, then only it gets saved. So that happens when the checked function, and I mean the checked variable, stays true. If the checked variable stays false, because if any of these have errors over here or here, then it will not get saved. It will just go to else and return. So that's why we do a if self.checkData, which might be true or false depending on the number of errors. So that's how the whole check data thing works. Now let's go into the second part, which may or may not cause errors, which is our start meeting function. Now the errors that can possibly occur in the start meeting function is in this line, in which we try to start the application and then connect to it. Now the problem will be that in case if the person does not have an installation of Zoom, then we cannot start the application. That's error number 1. Error number 2 is that we cannot connect to the application because we do not have an internet connection. Now this is partially fixed by the check network function, but this check network function also has a flaw. Now in case if the internet never comes, then the check network function will keep on running in an infinite loop. So to prevent this from happening, we need to add a timeout for the while loop. So the timeout, we need to import another module called time from time. I don't know why they gave the same names for their modules and the classes. So we import time and then we go back to the while loop. After this, we create a variable called timeout, and then timeout equals time, bracket open, bracket close, plus 30 seconds. So time will be the current time in most probably seconds format. We add also a 30 more seconds to it. So if the current time is equal to the timeout, then we have to stop the while loop. So we give a 30 seconds extra for the timeout. So this check network function will only run for 30 seconds. Now if you want, you can change it to 15 seconds, 20 seconds, 5 minutes, your wish, but make sure to give them in seconds format. So after we give 30 seconds, we go to the while loop. So while not underscore connected means while true. So while true will only make the infinite loop work. Now after that, we do a and timeout is timeout is lesser than time. So if the timeout is greater than time, timeout is greater than time. That means if the timeout time hasn't reached, then it can run that long. That's what this whole thing is. So now we have a timeout function. Now suppose in case what we happen is, suppose the timeout gets over and this function returns back to the timer function. So here is self.checkNetwork and then here is self.startMeeting. Now if this function returns back, it will anyway start the meeting from the start meeting function. So to prevent this from happening, we do the same thing that we did in the save table function, like if self.checkData. So here what we do is a if not self.checkNetwork, and then we put self.startMeeting in it. We also had a column here. The reason is, when you successfully connect to the internet connection, then not underscore connected will turn to false. So not underscore connected will turn to false. So you can only use the self.startMeeting function if you have connected to the internet. So for this, if suppose self.checkNetwork is false, so if you do a if not false and then a print 0 and hit shift enter, you can see that 0 is printed. At the same time, if you try with this with true over here and then you do a shift enter, you can see that 0 is not printed. So if the internet is connected, then only self.startMeeting will work. Otherwise, self.startMeeting will not work. So that's what happens here. And next we'll get into a short time lapse which will fix the internet issue in the start meeting function. That ends our time lapse. So here's what we added new. So as I told before, here first we try to start the application and then connect to it. Now I changed the timeout seconds to 15 seconds because we only need to wait that long. If it fails, then we just quit. And after that, if that fails, first we try to find out, we try to connect to another window, which is zoom space hyphen space not connected, which will show that it is an internet issue. And that means after that we notify that zoom auto bad internet connection over here. Now if it is also not a bad internet connection, then we notify that zoom not installed meeting failed, then we quit that. Now in case if suppose that we started the application and connect to it without any issues, then we go on with the normal procedure from here to here. Then we add in the ID, the name, the checkboxes, and then we click join button and click underscore input. And after that we try to find the password box, and then we again fill the normal password, then we send in the enter button, and then we notify that we join the meeting using meeting space joined. Now if suppose that we didn't find the password button or the password box over here, they go to accept and we try to find another window which shows invalid meeting ID, please check and try again. This window will notify that we've given an invalid meeting ID. So that's another thing. So if we find this window which shows invalid meeting ID, we will notify invalid ID, or you know what, let's give invalid meeting ID. Invalid meeting ID, and then we'll quit it. Now, after that, even if it is not an invalid meeting ID, we will just notify bad internet connection, and that ends the whole process. Now, this is the programming part for our error handling section. Now, let's test out our check meeting function. I mean the check data function. So let's go ahead and quit the app from here. Let's quit it, and then we'll go back and run the program. And there you go, we have the meeting. So now I'm gonna delete this. I'm just gonna hit save. I'm gonna hit add new meeting, and then add my name, Aaron, and the ID I'm gonna give 123 123 123. Now this is 9 digits, and the date I'm gonna give 28th. Today is 27th. I'm gonna give 28th, and the ID is 9 digits. Now if I hit save, you can see that nothing is changed to red in color, and it's still working. But now if suppose I removed a digit, so now it's 123 123 and 12, and then I changed the date to say 26, which was yesterday, and if I hit save, you can see that the both ID and the date time column has changed color to red. Now suppose I fix the date time column, I change the date back to 28th, which is tomorrow, and if I hit save, you can see that the date time column changes to black, but the ID still says red. So I changed the ID back to 11 digits. I think this is 11 digits. No, this is 10 digits. This is 11 digits. And now if I hit save, yeah, you can see that it changed back to black. Now if I add one more digit, which is now 12 digits, and if I hit save, you can see it changes to red. Now here is an other fact. Now I delete everything. I save it again. So now the SQL database is blank. I hit add new meeting, and then wait, suppose yeah, let's type in an ID 123 123 and 12, and we'll change and give the date and time an invalid date and time. Now if I hit save, it both changes to red. Then I will quit the application, and I'll go back and run the application again. You can see that it isn't saved. It is still blank. It will only save that data if it is valid. So if I give 123 123 123, and here also the valid date and time, and if I hit save and then I quit the application and open it again, you can see that it has been saved and it works perfectly. So that proves that the check data function works. Now the error handling functions will work anyway, and to test that is not that easy. You need to create the situations where it can cause errors, and it'll take a little bit more time. So you guys can test that on your own. I think it works. It works for me. If it doesn't work for you, just comment down below. I'll see what's wrong with it. That's all we can do in error handling now, and let's get into the small last and final touches. And now finally we need to add two small functions to the UI. So the functions are: one, we will be adding a icon to the top left corner of the application like every other UI, and we will also add a label which displays the current date and time over here. These are the two functions that we're going to do, and after that we have completely finished our application. So we go ahead back into the designer, which I have opened the Zoom Order UI, which is the UI that we created before, and we take a push button. So we put the push button in the title bar, and then we change its geometry over here. This is the geometry tab. You open here, and then you change the width to 30 into 30. So this is going to be the icon size, and then we remove this over here. We change it to blank, and then we put it in this corner. Now the reason we're giving a push button is because a push button is easy to display a icon instead of another label or anything. So you can just go ahead, place this in this corner over here, and you can hit save. Now after that we need to add a label. So to add the label, you get the label from the display widgets. You put the label over here, you extend this a bit. It is centralized, kind of, and then you change its size. We'll put a time equals, no, not time equals, time column. Let's give a Jan. Wait, how is the time displayed here? It's date and time and then hours and minutes. So here we'll do the same as date. So we'll give 01 hyphen Jan space comma space 1200 colon 00. This is just a mock time. We will change this when we go to the code. So first we need to change the name of the push button. So we'll just put this as app icon. Okay, that's the name of this push button here, and then we need to change the name of the label, which we'll give as time, display time. So display time. Okay, so now we need to change the font of this. So we go back to the label widgets, and here in font we click here, these three dots, we extend this a bit, and Sego UI. So this is what we need, Sego UI and size 10. We hit OK. Oh, that size 10 is a bit too big. Let's go with size 9 or maybe 8. Let's try 9. Yeah, 9's perfect. So this is gonna be our label which displays the time, and this push button here will display our icon. We'll add the icon in the code, and we will also change the timer in the code also. So we have named the display time and also our app icon. Now we need to convert this UI file back into our Python file. Now for those of you guys who watched my previous videos, you might have seen how I converted the UI file back to a Python file. So again, we open command prompt, so cmd, and then we do a pyuic 5x. We give the UI file's name, which is zoom auto ui.ui, and then -o, which is the output file. We'll give the main win UI file, mainwinui.py. So if I hit enter, it has converted the file back to mainwinui.py. So now if you go back to Spider and open the mainwinui.py, you can see that it is changed. And if you search for, let's say, display time, you can see that the variable display time is here, and also the app icon. So if you go here and search for app icon, you can see that app icon is right here. So self.appicon.set object name. Now let's set the UI's icon and also the timer. So that is very easy. All you have to do is go to the timer function, and every time the current time changes over here, we do a self.display time. self.ui dot display time dot set text. Let's give time and bracket, curly bracket open, cur time. Wait, yeah, cur time. So this is our time. Now this, if you guys don't know what this curly bracket cur time is, this is another function that is inbuilt in Python. Now, usually when you add text and other text together, you use the plus symbol. So here's what happens. Suppose if A equals banana, yeah, banana. Let's remove the space here, hit enter, and then we do a print fruit, and then we do here a plus banana. A plus A, and then we close the function, and then we do shift enter. You can see fruit banana. Now instead of using plus, there's another method, which is this baby bracket method. So bracket A, close A, and then before this you have to put a letter F. So if you put F only, it works, otherwise it'll just print whatever you gave in the print function. So now if you hit enter, you still get the same output. That's what we do right here. Now this way we keep on updating the time in the timer. Now after that, what we're going to need to do is add the icon for the application. Now for this, we will go to the setup UI function or the init function, and then we do a self.ui.app icon. We use the Q icon. Every time you need to add an icon or an image, you need to use Q icon, which is what we do the same over here. So Q icon, and then we give the path to our icon image. So we put that over here, and then I guess we have completed the application. So now we go back, and then we quit the application, and we run it again and hope there's no errors. Okay, we have an error. What is the error? Oh yeah, wait. Oh yeah, I know what the error is. We have to do a dot set. Wait, is it a dot? Yeah, a dot set icon. No, you have to do a dot set icon, and then you have to hit run. And there is no errors other than the UI button a bit to the left. We have to put it a bit to the right. So we go back to the table. We go back to the UI, and then we move this a bit to the right. That's to right. Let's move it wait, how much difference is this? Okay, we'll move it 5. Okay, that looks like a reasonable distance. Okay, we save this and go back to our command prompt. We convert it again, and then we quit the application. Let's go back to Spider, and then we quit the application. Why isn't this? Okay, we quit the application, and then we run it again. Now it is perfect. The time keeps on changing per second, and we also have an icon on the top left corner, and everything is almost perfect. Well, this ends our episode, and sorry for the delay for the release because I ran into some deadlines at school and I got hung up on it. And this is the last episode for the Zoom Automation application series, and in the next episode we will convert it into a fully functional application and create an installer for it, and then you can give it to your friends or upload it or download it. Well, thank you guys for watching, and if you like my content, please make sure to subscribe, comment down below, and if there's something you want me to improve, please do that as well. And I'll see you guys in the next one.